Yo, what's up guys? Welcome to part 3 of this how to shoot a travel video series. In this video, we're going to cover my full in-depth post-production process to how I edited this Thailand video. So let's go ahead and dive right in and show you my process. Alright, so if we take a look at the project file here, I'm just going to expand this so you can see how many video files and audio files I actually have in this project. Suffice it to say that a lot of time and energy has gone into making this as good as it can possibly be. Now, the first question I will answer is how come my timelines are kind of messy like this, where I'm using 17 layers of video files and there's a lot of empty space all around here. So when I first start an edit, I start with just one line, but as I build upon the video, I start adding new options and different things on top of that. So what you're seeing here is I eventually got up to my 8th, 9th, 10th options of clips that I liked, and then I eventually started deleting and removing and replacing different clips from underneath it and rearranging. So it gets messy like that simply because I do a lot of rearranging these clips in post to assure that I'm using the best possible clips in the best spots of my edit. That's why it looks kind of messy. Once I start going through this, you guys will see what each of those things are and it will start to make more sense. On the audio level here, this is one thing that I think a lot of people neglect that I do, I think, pretty well, is I fill the sound with good sound design. So we'll go through this as well in depth. What you're seeing here are different layers of audio that I've added to help fill the ambient noise in the background to make you feel like you're actually there. So again, we're 14 levels deep in audio. Just one clip has 10 different sound effects stacked on top of each other. And the more you can stack audio-wise, the more full that sound is going to sound and make you feel engulfed in the imagery. And as I talked about in the previous videos, editing is a huge part of the storytelling process. So just to give you a quick backstory to how this edit came about, I shot the footage, came home, was busy with other projects, so I didn't start editing it for a few weeks actually. And I initially handed it off to, at the time, my old employee, Nick George, who was working for me. And I gave him the footage and I said, hey, see what you can do with this. I'm not sure yet what direction I want to go, but I want to see fresh eyes go through the footage and see what clips you would like. So I had him do an edit. He did a lot of things that I really liked, and I ended up using some of the things that he did in the final edit. But for the most part, it mostly helped me say, okay, seeing the footage that he used, I know which clips I would want to use that he didn't use and which clips that he didn't use that I want to throw in. After seeing his edit, I realized, okay, I have a better idea now of what I want to do with it, the clips I want to put in, the clips I want to take out from what he did. So I originally took his edit, took a few parts from it, and then started building my own edit. Now, like I talked about in the previous part 1 and part 2, coming into this, I knew I wanted to make a video that would express some of my beliefs about God and showing his existence through some of the beautiful aspects of this earth, the living creatures on it, humans, animals, and so forth. But as I started editing, I narrowed down the footage to my favorite clips, the best of the best, like I talk about, but then I wasn't sure how to piece it all together. And so I initially just put a piece of music, any piece of music that I thought felt pretty good, and then put random clips over top of it, the best clips. And then I told my wife, I said, I don't know where to put these clips in what order to best convey this message. Can you write a script to help me come up with a direction for these clips? So she wrote a script, and from that script, I then had a direction for how I wanted to place those clips in what order. And so by having this script and these words, I knew exactly which images would look best with which clips. For example, part of the script was "we play," and the kids playing obviously fit the best there. Previously, I had no idea where to put that clip. In this part here, "we work," a picture of a woman working. It was very obvious that that was a very good candidate to put that clip in there. And there were some clips that I'd picked to put in the final edit that didn't make the final edit, that were probably prettier but didn't fit the script and the story. And so that's one point I want to make, is it's not always about what looks best, it's about what helps tell your story the best. Now, I had another question. People asked, why didn't you do a voiceover instead of doing the on-screen text? And I could have gone either way with it, and I contemplated doing a voiceover, but at the end of the day, voiceovers can either be hit or miss. They can be super powerful, or they can be super distracting. And I was afraid that if we didn't get the voiceover right, the perfect voice, the perfect tonality, that it would distract from the message and take away from it. So we played it safe, I guess you could say, by putting the on-screen text. And we'll talk about my process of using text and how there was certain challenges we ran into there as well. But let's go ahead and start from the beginning. I'm going to show you what I've done to these clips. We're going to talk about effects that I've used, color correction that I've used, reasons why I put certain clips in different spots in the edit, and of course dive into some of the sound design choices as well. So we'll go ahead and start from the beginning here. So the first clip, like I talked about, originally I wanted a clip that was possibly a drone shot or something that was more establishing of the location of Thailand. This clip works because I feel like it represents Thailand, as it's one of the more iconic spots in Thailand, iconic temples. I like having push-in shots for my intro shots. I feel like that helps introduce the audience, helps establish, and then for outro shots, I oftentimes like to be pulling away from something. I didn't in this edit, but a lot of times that's kind of how I like to bring people in and then back out of my edits. Now, before I actually talk about this clip, let's talk about the aspect ratio. This is in 21:9. I decided to edit this project in 21:9 aspect ratio instead of the standard normal 16:9, which is what, you know, your standard YouTube ratio is. And the reason I did that was because I was editing. I just barely gotten this brand new 21:9 screen, this LG screen, and I wanted to shoot a project, edit a project, finish a project in that 21:9 aspect ratio, because that way when I watch YouTube videos, I'm able to see that full expansiveness of that screen, instead of if I did it in 16:9, it would cut off on the side. So that was kind of the reason behind editing this in a 21:9 aspect ratio. Also, I like the cinematic look of the wider screen, so that was the reason for that. Now, with this clip specifically, let's look at the color correction I've done. Now, sometimes I'll put the color correction directly on the clip, and other times I'll do an adjustment layer and put the color correction on that. Usually I'll do that when I want to not do the color correction till the very end, because it'll slow down the machine or whatever. So I do the color correction very last with an adjustment layer over top. But as you can see, there's quite a difference there from the before and after on the color correction here. I shot this all on the Red Weapon, which shoots pretty flat in very raw format, and so you have a lot of flexibility in post to really play with those colors and make things pop. So let's take a quick look at the effects I used on this. So all we've done is put the Lumetri color effect on here, which you can find in the effects tab down here. Lumetri color, I drag that on. Within the Lumetri color tab, within my basic color correction, I'll first come here and play with my temperature and tint. As you can see, it was a little bit warmer than I wanted, so I brought that warmth down just a bit. Normally with Red Weapon footage, it's, in my opinion, a little bit green, so I usually bring the tint up a little bit. I didn't much on this clip. Brought the contrast up a little bit, highlights down a tad, shadows up quite a bit. I wanted to really bring out the shadows here and give it kind of that HDR look. We brought those up to about 40, whites up just a tad, and then a ton of saturation. I wanted this to be a very vibrant, saturated look. There's the original at 100% without any saturation added, and then boom. So seeing how adding that saturation really brings that image out. That's my style. I like to do that, really make those images pop. And then curves, as you can see, I've kind of gone with this method of playing around with different spots on the RGB curve. Now I'm going to reset this and kind of show you the process of how I do this. So I'll first start with my shadows, find a spot where I like those, and in this case I think I brought it up just a tad, and then I'll get my highlights where I like those, and I think I wanted to kind of reserve the color in the sky there, so we didn't go too high on that. And then I found somewhere in the middle here. At this point I'm just watching the image and seeing what it does and seeing what I like, and on this part I liked it up a little bit, and then we go in between those two dots. And I see that sun really overexposes in the sky there. But if you bring it too low over here on the right, you start to see it lose some saturation in the sky. So do you want more saturation on the right there, or blow out the sky more on the left there? And so I kind of went in between those two, a little bit of blowout in the sky, but reserving those blues on the right there. And then again, finding in between. Now on this one, I'm looking at the path there in the middle. I want to retain the detail in there without going too overboard. And so we'll go somewhere around right there. Same thing with this guy in the middle here. That's affecting my shadows. We'll bring that up just a tad, and then right here, our final step, and we'll just bring that up just a tad. So that wasn't originally what I had, but it's close to it. And you can see how that just kind of makes it pop a little bit more, brings out some of those shadows to give it more of that HDR feel. And again, this is completely personal preference. Every project that I color it different depending on the mood I want to go for, depending on the look I'm trying to achieve. Sometimes I like it more contrasty, and sometimes I like it, you know, less shadows and whatnot. So in this case, I want a little bit less shadows, show up more dynamic range. It just depends on the project, but that's kind of the process for color correcting this. So again, here's your before and after of the Lumetri color. See how it really brought everything out just with those fine adjustments, mostly bringing up shadows, bringing in color, and adding some contrast and some pop with that RGB curve. So there's our color correction on that first clip. And you'll notice that with this first clip, I didn't have the music, which is this first line here, come in until the second clip. So this first clip, if you listen, is just sound design. And then you hear the music come in. So I'm going to show you how I kind of created that build up to the song in that first clip. And we're going to listen to these one by one to see the different effects, different sound effects I used. Here's the first one. Ah, looks nice, sounds nice. So let me show you where that's at. So that sound effect is called The Approach, and I bought that in a sound effects library called Anticipation Sound Effects, which is by Lens Distortion. I think it was like $100 for a bunch of risers like that you just heard, some hits, some whooshes. So I really like that sound effect pack, and I highly recommend buying a few sound effect packs that you like to help add some intensity to your edits. So that was the first riser that we put in there. The next sound we used was a little bit of ocean sound, so you can feel the water that you're seeing there. And then this right here, a little whoosh to kind of help transition those clips. Next sound effect, some seagulls in the background. So again, we talk about layers, trying to get as many layers of sound as we can in there to really add to the ambience. Again, this was from that sound effects pack I bought. I don't even know what you'd call that little bell thing in the background, just kind of adding some suspense, and that's it. So about 4 deep on that one to give you what sounds like this. All together, all 4 sounds. Help build you into the song and into that second clip. So you guys can see how powerful it is to be able to sound design, and that just comes with time. In the course, we have the sound effects library that you can get for free from Adobe that I highly recommend using a lot of those sound effects. Probably 90% of the sounds in this video are going to be external sound effects that I didn't actually take on set, on location. They were just added afterwards as sound designs from sound packs. So even if you don't capture great sounds, if you have a good sound library, you can really fill this in afterwards and really make it come to life. Now let's talk about my text location on this. I chose to put it right in the middle, and you'll see throughout this video that I'm putting the text in different parts of the frame. It's not really consistent. I love for it to be consistent. It doesn't fit in the same spot in every clip, so you have to kind of shift it around and put it where it's readable. But you see that I put it right in between here because there's a dark spot back there. So putting that white text against this dark spot allowed me to make it stand out and make it readable. That's another thing with text, guys. Make sure your text, the fonts you're using are legible, they're readable. You don't want people to be squinting to try and read your words. You want it to be super readable. And I actually had people, after I finished this edit, watch the video, and I said, were you able to read all the words easily without getting too distracted or having to spend too much time reading? There wasn't too many words per clip, or they weren't too big or too small or too hidden. You know, get some feedback from people and make sure that before you publish a video that your text is readable, it's legible, and that in a spot where people can see it. So again, I put it against this little black spot back here to help it stand out. And you notice that I'm fading that in and out. Some of the text you'll see that I have a hard stop cut, and sometimes I'm fading them in and out. Again, it just depended on the clip and the pace of the song, but right now we're super slow, so I'm kind of fading that in with the music. Okay, so second clip here. You'll notice kind of this shimmering on the outside. I had some people ask me if that was in camera or done in post. That, my friends, is a light leak done in post. This specific light leak is called Orange Blue Ambience 3 from the Illuminate Light Leaks pack that I bought for, I think, $50, $100, somewhere around there. So for all my videos that I use light leaks, I use that Illuminate Light Leaks pack, and you'll see a few throughout this video as well. But as you can see here, I have that light leak starting just as this clip ends to help transition it into that next clip. So watch this without the light leak, and you can kind of see the difference that makes to help transition those two clips. So it's just a little more sudden, and then when you add the light leak in there, It just helps soften it and make it feel like they were more cohesive, like they were supposed to go together. So using light leaks is a great way to kind of help transition and help clips go smoothly together. Also, I forgot to mention, but on the end of this first clip, we have a slight speed ramp going from slow to fast, so it's just picking up in speed just a little bit there at the end to kind of lunge you into the next clip. And you'll see that as well throughout. I use a lot of speed ramp transitions to help keep the edit flowing, and I'll show you how I do that here in just a second. So you got the light leak there, again another push-in shot. And I'm being strategic with which shots I have follow which shots. So this one is pushing forward and the next clip is pushing forward, and that helps it feel continuous and have some continuity to the flow of the edit. I see a lot of times people have a shot pushing in and the next shot is going sideways and the next shot's going back, and so it's a little bit more jarring that way. Sometimes you don't have the right footage to be able to do that, but I try when I can to try and make those clips flow into each other by using similar movement in each clip. And then you'll see that the placement of my text is up here where you have some spare sky in between these trees fading in up there. And of course I'm matching the text to the type of visuals you're seeing. That's a very majestic shot. That's a very beautiful shot. This is a very wondrous shot. So I was very strategic as well with which shots I would match with which wording. Let's watch clip number 3 now. Again, notice the sound effects. We have that paddle noise in there. That's all after the fact. That isn't actual audio. Most of this is not actual audio. I'm just throwing in different sound effects from my sound effects library. That sound effect is called paddling sound effect. Again, the seagulls and again some water noises. So pretty similar to that first clip with the sound effects here. Again, you see a whoosh sound helping transition that clip to the next one. Also, we have the speed ramp going out. Now, I'm not always using speed ramps, and some people don't like how often I use speed ramps, and I actually played with each clip with a speed ramp and each clip without a speed ramp, and sometimes I didn't like them with, and sometimes I thought it helped add to the edit and help it flow better. So I was also pretty strategic with that and tried out every clip with both scenarios. So sometimes you'll see a speed ramp like that I felt helped it carry on to the next clip, and sometimes like this clip, it never speed ramps, it just carries out. So again, creative choice. Now with this Buddha clip, you can hear in the background some monk chanting. So let's listen into a sound effect that I threw in here. So that's called Buddhist chanting, and it's probably not even in the right language. I don't know, but I threw it in there because it helped add to it and made it feel like you were there in these monasteries. So again, super deep on the amount of sound effects here. Now you see these crackling incense. I have a sound effect for those as well. Let's listen to just those. And then to transition out of that, you see that I'm pushing forward, and then I speed ramp backwards. So I speed it up and reverse it to help it flow into the next clip. And to help sell that movement, that change of pace, I have these sound effects to transition. That's just pages in a book flipping. So a bunch of whoosh sounds, put those together. Now with everything. So a lot of layers of sound to help make everything feel like it's in motion. It's all these little things that really add to these edits and make people feel emotional and get hyped about what they're seeing. Now as far as color correction on all these clips, they're very similar to what we did on that first clip. Adding a lot of saturation, some shadows, bringing down highlights, up some contrast, bringing down that temperature down just a little bit. So most of these clips are going to be colored very similarly. I'll point any out that are colored different, but again, we're going for that super saturated look, and you see that without the saturation, it's just not nearly as vibrant, and I wanted a super vibrant look on these. And some people would say those are too oversaturated. Personally, that's my style. It's what I like, at least for this video, so that's what we've done here. And then with the curves, again, I would play around with that until I got a look that I liked. Now normally if you're just starting out, I recommend with these RGB curves, I like to bring up these highlights and down the shadows, and that gives it a contrasty, punchy look. See the before and after there. So a lot of times that's what I'll do here in RGB curves, is give it that punch by bringing down shadows and bringing up highlights, but that does take away some of your dynamic range. And so for this project we wanted a little bit more dynamic range to expose some of the shadows we had up here, and so that was the reasoning behind not making it quite as punchy, to show off some of that dynamic range. So there's the before and after of what I did here. Moving on in the edits. So you notice the music has changed pace. It started to pick up, and so has the length of the clip. So if you look here at our edits, well, the first clip was about 7 seconds, next clip's about 5 seconds, next clip's about 5 seconds. And then as the music changes, notice that the length of the clip also changes. Now the length of the clip is cut in half. So you could fit 2 clips in the previous length of the 1 clip. I like to do that a lot. Change the pace, change the direction you're going with the beat of the song. So as the song picked up, so did the pacing of the video. That's a great way to help your audience feel the music and feel more emotion. Okay, so notice these 2 clips back to back are both moving from left to right. So I strategically placed those back to back because they flow into each other. And I originally had a different clip. If you look here underneath, this was a different clip I had at the time, but it didn't have as much emotion to me as this guy worshiping did. And so when it comes to shot selection, you have to watch it back and say, what makes me feel more? That guy or those ancient ruins? And nothing wrong with those. It's a great shot that could be put somewhere else in the edit, but I personally couldn't find a spot where I felt like this is driving more emotion than other clips. And so I eventually just took it out of the edit altogether. Again, notice the cackling sound of the incense. In this case, they're like candles we're looking at, so it's not even the same thing, but I'm using the same sound effect because, one, it takes more time to try and find a whole new sound, and it's close enough that it looks pretty similar. So I reuse a lot of sound effects throughout the edit that I've already found and sound good, and I recycle them in different parts and different visuals. Notice the sound effects changing. We're going to listen to just the sound effects for a sec. Let's mute the music. And I would recommend doing this when you edit. Watch your video through full time without any music and see if it sounds full and sounds good without music. And if it does, that means you've done a good job of sound designing. So listen to this. And see how the sound effects kind of shift from this clip to the next? This one is kind of full of people in a temple, and then it shifts to outdoor in the nature. And so we get kind of quieter there. Now there's a group of people again, so we're putting some muffled sounds of people whispering. And then as somebody walks by camera, we have a sound effect for that thing passing by camera. All these little things just add so much more to the edit and make the audience feel engaged. A little dip sound here. And you can hear in the background you have that Buddhist chanting throughout a lot of this stuff because a lot of it's taking place in temples. Now I don't even know why I put that sound in there, but it sounded cool to me. To me, watching that thing spin and hearing that sound of the chandelier thing seemed to go together, so I just went with it. So a lot of it isn't always logical, the sound you choose to use, but it's just whatever sounds good and you feel helps add to the edit. Again, kids laughing, playing. Now one thing I want to point out with some of these sound effects, to give it kind of an echoey, reverby feel, I've added an effect to these called studio reverb. So listen to this without the reverb. Now with the reverb. So it just kind of makes it feel kind of distant and a little bit more dreamy. And I'm not sure where these are set by default, but I don't remember doing much to this. Maybe you change the room size or the output levels, but those are the settings I use to get that dreamy, reverby effect. Now let me come back to this transition swipe real quick here. Now we talk about how to do this in unique transitions in the editing section, but we're just going to go over this real quick so you can see. Nick George actually did this as a part of his original edit that I liked, that I incorporated into my final edit. But the way you accomplish this look is by dragging the crop effect onto your clip and then creating a mask. You can draw a mask, and you can see here the mask that Nick has drawn, and then frame by frame you draw the mask around whatever you're wanting to fade out of. So you can see he's drawn every single frame. There's like 7 or 8 frames there that he's drawn, and then just adding a little feather here to make it a little bit more seamless. And it looks like he had his feather set to 167. So that's how he was able to simply create that transition effect. Again, we covered that in depth in the course. It's basically just a crop effect with a mask painted around it, and there's the final result. Now notice how these two transition into each other. So we have 2 separate clips, one of the dip and one of the ladle pouring into the cup here. So I decided to cut as this starts coming up, and then I transitioned from this guy still coming up. So that was very strategic to help those 2 clips cut together well, so it feels like that motion is continuing. Now both of these clips have a speed ramp on them. They start at 100%, which by the way, these were all shot at 60 frames per second, converted down to 24 frames per second, so they're all in slow motion. And then you see that I speed them up to, in this case, about 500%, which is going to be 2 times normal speed, because 250% would be normal speed. So we go from 100% to 500%. To speed that up, and then coming down, this clip goes from 250, which is normal speed, to 100%, which is slow motion. And you can see that I kind of ramp that in a little bit to help ease that speed ramp transition there. And same thing on this end, we're ramping into that so it's not abrupt. Here's what it would be like if it was more abrupt. So again, I always like to ramp into those speed transitions. Again, you'll notice that same light leak applied there over top. Help transition those 2 clips. Again, that paddle sound effect. Children playing sound effect. And see that speed ramp coming off here. Slow motion. And we speed out into the next clip that just starts out slow. So not every clip is speed ramped. I only did it when the music would change. So listen to it with that music on, and it kind of makes more sense when I speed ramp based off of the music. So listen to the music on this speed ramp here. So you have kind of that do-do-do-do-do. So in that part of the song, I have a little speed ramp to help you feel that beat in the song. Now on this part, I wasn't sure what clip to put here for the word discover. And originally I had something else, and I thought that the elephant trekking through the forest here was a good discovery shot. And then learn was good for showing a little baby. So again, throughout this, I'm picking the clips based on, which things I feel would go well with those words. And I'm grouping also footage that was shot in the same places when I can. So this clip is in a tree house area. And the next clip is in the same location, just a different spot, but they're similar. I'm doing that a lot where throughout the edit, I'm placing clips together that I feel are related in some way. Now on this elephant shot, notice I have a tight shot to a wide shot, and those cut together really well. So that's why I try when I'm shooting to get some tight shots, some medium shots, and some wide shots, because then I have some flexibility in post to be able to make it into a scene instead of just a solo shot. Also, same thing as the ladle shot. We have these speed ramping into each other. So we have slow motion, goes to fast motion into that step, and I purposefully made the elephant step on the beat. Helps you feel the beat when he's stepping on it, and I'm adding a sound effect on top of the beat to emphasize that step. Also notice I matched up his left foot hitting the ground and made sure to put the next clip where his left foot is already on the ground and that right foot starts to come up. So these are the little things that I'm thinking about when I'm editing to make sure that there's continuity and that the edit flows. So left foot comes down on this clip and the left foot's already down on the next clip and the right foot starts coming up. And again, we speed ramp out of this one. We start fast and slow down. So that helps it create that motion of the elephant stepping, and you're going from a tight shot to a wide shot, but it all feels kind of like one shot because you've used a speed ramp, you've made sure to cut on the same foot, all these little things and sound effects to help it be cohesive. Notice the car noises in the background as you see cars. Notice how I'm putting the text on the darkest part of the image, these shaded trees over here. So I'm being very strategic about where I'm placing the text. And on this one, there actually wasn't a very dark spot, and it wasn't very easy to see over here, but I wanted the text over here instead of on my subjects. And so I actually created a duplicate layer of the clip and then cropped. So if you see this clip alone, is just this corner right here. So I've cropped it out like that, and then I've feathered the edges, and then I've brought the exposure down on this. And so now when you see both these layers together, you see how you can see that text a lot better because I've darkened just that one little spot there. So that's a good little trick if you are doing text overlay. I did this a few times throughout the edit to darken a certain part of the screen so that I could see the text better, because there's a lot of highlights in the background here and it was just kind of blending in, and so that allowed it to stand out more and be more readable. Also, quick note about the text itself. This is called Verlag, is the font that I'm using, and I've split it up so that the main word is in bold and the word that is in front of it, the smaller word, is light. So by changing the boldness of the text, it kind of helps to give it, in my opinion, a little bit more cinematic look. So I've done that throughout the edit here. Okay, so again, you notice the grouping of the monkeys. I have two monkey shots here, so I put them back to back to kind of help feel like the theme is the same, they're relatable to each other. Also, I purposefully made "we love" about me showing affection to my daughter, and then this monkey baby showing affection to its mom. And so putting those back to back makes a connection, and again, makes the audience feel something that they otherwise wouldn't have had you not been very specific and strategic about your clip placement. And again, we have a human interacting with an animal and a human interacting with an animal. So those are strategically put back to back because they're relevant, they're relatable to each other, and make it a continuous flow of what you're seeing on the screen as far as the text goes. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting transition I did here. It's a speed ramp, so we go from slow motion to normal speed. But my next clip was of this long neck tribe lady in the middle of the frame standing straight up. The shot I did of my wife was kind of a cantered angle. She was kind of going this way, and so I eventually straightened out the shot after I got the shot. I was filming and then I straightened out and turned the camera off. And I utilized that straightening out part to help transition into the next clip because it puts my wife in a similar position to the next clip, and so that helps it transition because it's like she's becoming the next person, morphing into this new person. So that was strategic by speed ramping her into a certain position to transition into that next clip. And just to give you an idea, I'm going to show you what it would look like had we not had a speed ramp right there. So it still works, but it just doesn't transition as smooth. It's a little bit more jarring. And we've also thrown in yet another light leak to help transition those. So without the light leak, just to me, it doesn't flow as well. So now compare that to the speed ramp and the light leak. Yeah, to me it just carries you into that next shot better. Again, we're grouping shots. The motion of these is static. These are all static shots of people's faces. So I group those together because they cut together well. And then this shot right here is static, but I start pushing in a little bit and to the right digitally. And I do this a lot throughout the edit as well. You'll see here that our position and scale starts out here, and then we're slowly zooming it in and to the right. So I do that digital zoom throughout a lot as well to just kind of help it feel a little bit more movement when there isn't any movement. And that helps kind of go into this next clip as well, which I've also thrown in a digital zoom. So let's show it without a digital zoom. It's a good shot, but by throwing on a digital zoom, it just makes you feel like I'm pushing towards it and makes you feel a little bit more immersed in that. On this clip, notice how I'm cutting on the light flare here. So I wait for the light flare to come, and then I cut on it. So that's also something very strategic because I'm looking for certain movements or things in the clips to cut on that will help it transition to the next clip. Again, grouping these two, interactions with humans and animals. Baby's feeding monkey, mom is feeding elephant. So very strategic in placing clips together to help tell the story. We talk about storytelling. Using the music is first and foremost for me. I love, again, using the beats of the music to help the pacing go well, and we'll talk about it as the pacing picks up here in a second, how I use the music to help carry my story. But this is a big part of it, is grouping clips together that are relatable, that make sense back to back. So it's just not random clips, a montage of clips, but you're actually trying to tell a story of what you're seeing. Now I purposefully chose this clip as happiness. One, because a lot of people's happy places are the beach, you know, it's kind of the stereotype. But then as she's turning around, she's smiling and laughing at the camera, showing happiness. And so that was very strategic as well. Obviously, I'm cutting on her left foot hitting the ground, and then I make sure the next clip is of her right foot coming forward. So again, keeping those clips continuous. And then we have a nice light leak to help transition from her to baby. So I'm telling a mini story here. I talked about this in part 2, but we're at this beach, this awesome location. My wife's here, my baby's here. There's the wife coming. Now they're playing together. So I shot a bunch of shots here, probably like 10 minutes of footage, and these didn't really happen in succession, but I show them in succession and try and tell a story in as little amount of time as possible to show you the events that transpired at that location. So that's a skill you have to learn, is figuring out, how do I tell a story in as little amount of time as possible with a lot of footage? And the story we tell here is we're at the beach, we have my wife, my baby, and they played and had a good time. So, I mean, a very simple, short mini story within the story. But the point is to shoot a lot of footage, as we've talked about before, but then also being able to choose the best clips within that footage that go together in succession to help tell that story. So from being on the beach to here, we see a music change. It builds up. So I chose to put what I feel is one of my most powerful clips at the part where the music climaxes. And I talk about this in the storytelling video in the creative section. But the climax of the song to me is where I try and put my most powerful clips. And to me, the most powerful clips is a baby laughing and then a baby interacting with her mom in a very happy manner. To me, those are some of the most powerful clips that I shot, is showing that connection, that love, that joy between an innocent baby and a loving mother. And so I chose to put that at the climax of the song to help people, as they feel the emotion of the most emotional part of the song, they also get the most emotional clips that help them feel love, feel joy, feel happiness, those emotions I'm trying to convey as a storyteller. So matching your clips with the music is a huge part of storytelling, and the main part of storytelling, the main goal as we talk about, is to help people feel emotion. So my goal there was to help people feel the emotion of that moment. Again, so this is one of the few parts where I have real audio. I captured the audio of my baby laughing, and it wasn't actually from that clip. I think I got that from a random video I took on my iPhone at some point at home, here at home. I took her laugh, I put that reverb on it again, and made it sound like it was actually laughing there on the beach. So again, sound designing is huge. I didn't capture an actual laugh on the beach there that was worth putting in, that was well captured, but I did have audio for laughing here at home that I was able to put in there in post. Again, speed ramping through this one into the next clip. This one speed ramps too. As the song speeds up and gets more intense, so does the speed of my editing. And this audio of these seagulls is actual real audio. I did have some good audio to use from that, so I've thrown in some audio of the birds here. Okay, so this is one of my favorite parts of the edit. As baby's hand goes up, I speed ramp it up. So it's slow motion. I speed it up just a tad here at the end, and then as her hand gets raised, looks like the monkey's about to bite her. That's why my wife's taking her hand away. And then I start off with speeding up this crocodile biting into this nice piece of meat. And so it looks like crocodile is biting to where the hand used to be. So again, just trying to make the audience feel maybe a little bit of suspense there, like, oh, you know. But being very purposeful with which clips you're putting in succession there. Now, one thing I will mention about handheld clips, a lot of this was shot in the glide cam, as I've mentioned, but there was a few handheld clips, like with these elephants. These are all handheld. So I did put warp stabilizer on every once in a while, and it's only up to 13%. I'm usually at 10-20%, not a lot, or else it starts to look funky. But here's what it looked like before warp stabilizer. So just not as smooth. Nice handheld shot, and then here is it with warp stabilizer. It obviously zoomed it in a lot because it was handheld and it was super shaky, so you are going to lose a lot of your frame and it's going to lower the resolution, but it is going to look smoother, so it's a trade-off. So that's one of the few times we use warp stabilizer. We probably only used it on maybe a fifth of the clips, especially the handheld ones, and then a little bit on some of these glide cam shots like this one. This was a glide cam shot that we used warp stabilizer on because we were speed ramping it. So anytime we speed ramp a glide cam shot, sometimes you're going to see some of those slight wobbles that you wouldn't see had it just been shown in slow motion. But as you speed it up, you start to see some of those imperfections. And so on this one, we also used a warp stabilizer too. All right, so now this part of the edit was done by Nick George, who I gave the first edit to. I told him to make it more transition-y and a little bit more flary. I ended up going away from that concept and making it more a slower edit, but I did like some of the cool transitions he did in his original edit, so I included this little sequence that he did of me showing this temple, and then he does a smooth zoom transition into being inside the temple, and then does a swipe up transition to me looking at the ceiling and rotating in a 360, and then transitioning into the 360 of these trees here. So these first two transitions are done with Baker Toots transitions. You can also do them with the transitions we have in the course. I've had my brother build some presets for Premiere Pro. They aren't as good. They're not as smooth. They're not going to look as good as the Baker Toots ones. But look up Baker Toots, T-U-T-S, on YouTube, and you can see that he has some presets for After Effects that are going to be a little bit better looking, and that's what Nick used here to transition between that and this one as well. So if you're really into these kinds of transitions, I'm not really into them. I use them sparingly, and so because I use them sparingly, I usually just put my cheap full-time filmmaker Premiere Pro presets on there. But if you really want them to look next level, I would recommend using Baker Toots presets from After Effects. Also, listen to the whoosh sounds. Every time we do a zoom in, you're getting a whoosh sound. So all that sound effect really helps add and sell those transitions. But now this one right here, going from this to that, that's just a hard cut transition. But the fact that they're both spinning the same way at the same, and they're both doing, you know, kind of a speed ramp into each other, it helps it sell like it was a fancy transition. And that's something I mentioned in the Feedback Friday video I did for Sushil. If you can do these in camera, then it's going to look more professional, it's going to flow better, and that's an example of it. Is those look like they were fancy transitions, some fancy preset in post, but they were just a hard cut. But because I planned for it and I said, okay, I'm going to do a 360 and then I'm going to do another one somewhere else, and I'm going to put those together in post. So I planned that while I was shooting, knowing I was going to piece those two shots back to back in my edit to make those flow well. And again, we're speed ramping, going from fast to slow, and then back to fast. And then again, as we speed up here, we're going from fast to slow in the next shot. So a speed transitions from fast to slow, and then speeds up again. This cut's kind of unique here because the whole shot is fast. This is at 1000%. This whole clip is 1000% here. It started out a little bit slower, at around 600%. And then it speeds up to 1000%, and on this pillar that comes in, I'm cutting to my next shot of the bird. Now I could have done what we did earlier in the edit and cropped on the end here and created a transition behind that pillar going to the next shot, and I actually did that originally and it looked a little bit gimmicky, so I just did a hard cut and it seemed to transition pretty well. It almost feels like it goes by the camera even though it doesn't. It's just a hard cut. But because I cut with it right in the middle there, it makes it feel like it was swiping through. So just play around with these. There's not going to be, there shouldn't be at least a go-to transition for every clip. Experiment with it, and if it doesn't look good, try something else. And that's, I think, a step I take that a lot of people don't take, is they just say, okay, let's try a zoom transition here, zooming in. And they put it on and like, yeah, it looks fine. All right, next clip. Instead of trying out a few different variations and saying, okay, that didn't look that great, let's see how this would look. Let's experiment with that. And going through that process of trying different things on different clips and different areas is going to help take your edits to the next level. And I think that's something a lot of people don't do out of laziness, or, I mean, it is a lot more time consuming to do that, but it really will make the difference in making sure that every transition, every clip was very purposeful and meaningful in what you did to it. Okay, so this clip right here, this is the bird blinking and zooming in on his eyeball into the next shot. So first off, let's take a quick break and talk about color correction. This was one of the bigger color corrections, I would say, as far as the difference it makes because of how much color is in this bird. So let's show you real quick what I did in Lumetri Color. Again, brought that temperature down a little bit, brought up the tint just a little bit, exposure down a tad, contrast way up, highlights up, shadows up just a tad, whites up just a tad, and saturation 200%. So we doubled that saturation. You see the before and after on that. A lot of color, and see with all that on there, just a lot more color popping. And adding that contrast really helps make the whole image pop. So you see with and without the contrast, See how it just kind of brings out all the wrinkles in his skin there? So different clips are going to call for different effects. So I wouldn't say just to copy and paste the exact same color correction to every single clip, because this clip works really well with a lot of contrast, whereas other clips aren't going to look as good with that much contrast. But I really liked having that contrast in there. Also, notice the white in here. It's kind of warm, kind of muddy, doesn't look that white. But by bringing down the temperature and bringing up the tint, it just made it a lot more white, especially when you add saturation. Look how muddy that looks. It just doesn't look white. It looks kind of gross, greenish. And so by adjusting that temperature and tint, it just really brings out the white and makes it feel white. And you can use this little eyedropper too, and we'll see what he would have said. And this is why I don't use the auto tools. I mean, that does not look white to me. And his skin here should be pretty white. So I know some of you guys like the automated tools that Premiere Pro has. I personally don't use them because this should all be white, but I'm doing it in a bunch of different spots and it's giving me a way different result in every single spot. So yeah, learn how to manually balance your colors and your color correction. I don't recommend using any of their color matching tools. They're not that good. Okay, but as far as the effect we've done here, look at the original clip. If you go to 100%, okay, so this is the original clip that I shot. It wasn't nearly as close as the final clip looked, but because I shot in 6K, and if you shoot in 4K, you have the ability to digitally zoom without losing too much resolution. And so that's the luxury of shooting in such high resolutions, is I was able to zoom way in. So this was my starting point, and then I zoom in even more all the way to what was probably at the very end 1080p. So I went from 6K, I went from like 5K, I started at like 5K, so I started already zoomed in and ended up at like 1080p on this final shot. And then I added our full-time filmmaker zoom transition here to help transition that into the next clip. So that's all I've done there. Also, I had to change the positioning because as I zoomed in, it was zooming in like on his ear, and I wanted to zoom in on his eye. So I had to change the positioning here so that his eye would end up in the middle at the end of the clip. So right there, it's zooming in on the center of the eye. So right here at the end, it's zooming in on the center of his eye. But if I wouldn't have changed the position, it would have ended up somewhere over here, and that's just not nearly as cool as having his eye in the center. So doing that digital zooming and reframing in post makes a big difference in transitions, but also just in reframing and making your images look better composed than they actually were. Now this clip right here, as I talked about, was a glide cam shot that I originally was just going to use as a slow-mo little segment, but I ended up speeding it up all the way to, this was sped up to 4,000%, and then I nested it so that I could also warp stabilize it. Anytime you do both effects, you have to nest it. So I warp stabilized it up to 17%, and that gave me that nice smooth look. If you take off that warp stabilizer, I'll show you what it looks like of me glide camming in fast motion. Super wobbly. And ideally I would have done that on the Crane 2, but again, I couldn't use the Crane 2 with my Red. But I was pleasantly surprised with the fact that I was able to warp stabilize a super fast glide cam shot and still get a good hyperlapse look here. Now notice this transition from the statue to the temple. Again, I lined them up so that they would go into each other like my wife and the long neck tribe lady, matching up those clips so that they have similar patterns that help them cut into each other. So the Buddha is in the exact same position as the temple, or pretty close, and so those two clips cut together really well. Again, this was the one clip that I used from 1DX Mark II hyperlapse with the Crane 2. So this was done with the Crane 2, hyperlapsed. Now with this hyperlapse, I originally was trying to put a warp stabilizer on there to help smooth it out because it's a little bit jittery. But unfortunately, when I put it even to just 1%, it got super warpy and just looked kind of funky. So I just went without the warp stabilizer on that. So there's no warp stabilizer there. And then again, transitioning from this doorway to what is kind of like a doorway in this, little thing you're walking through here, was a great way to cut and make those two seem like they were meant to be back to back. And again, we have that same orange and blue light leak to help cut those two together. See what it looks like without. Still good, but with that light leak, just helps make it nice and smooth and buttery going between those two. And of course, cutting on the music. Notice how these last couple sequences, as the edit picks up and gets faster and fancier, and then boom, it all ends on that one cut. So listen to the music and how I put these clips in succession to help build you up to that final oomph. Feel the music. Notice the whooshes as I go by the pillar, the whoosh sound effects. I do like a droplet, a water droplet in a sink to do the eyeball sound effect. And then boom, making you really feel it on that last shot there. And then flashing up the most important message: is there a God? And making the audience feel something. Whether you're a believer or not, you got to make you feel something right there. So that's the whole point, is trying to make somebody feel an emotion and then go act on it. Whether that's trying to get an unbeliever to think about it. Maybe there is a God. You know, that's the whole point of this. My story I'm trying to tell, the emotions I want people to feel, is I want people to act. I want people to become better versions of themselves and to go discover life. And so again, storytelling 101, using that music to make people feel those emotions to then make them go do something about it. Again, notice the placement of the text on this. The darkest part of the center here, there's a dark shaded area in the water that I put the text against to help it stand out more. And again, I've darkened that center point so that that text stands out even more. So I've created a second layer and darkened just the middle here. So here's, you know, what I've cropped out and darkened it to help that text stand out. And then we fade out the clip and then put up our final message there. And then it cuts off on the last beat. So it's all to the music, helping you feel the emotion of the edit to help you tell your story and make the audience feel emotion. So that is the breakdown of this Thailand edit. Obviously, there's a lot of things I've done on this. I can't really cover everything, but that should give you a pretty good idea of what I did, the things I was trying to accomplish, and some of the effects that helped you feel some of that emotion. Now, because I wasn't able to cover everything in this edit, feel free to ask any questions in the comments. Let me know if there's any lingering questions you had. Again, I cover pretty much how to do everything in this edit. I cover in the Premiere Pro editing section in the Full-Time Filmmaker course. So make sure to check that out and review that if there's any lingering questions you have about things I'm doing in there. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Hope you enjoyed, and this concludes part 3 of this travel video series. If you have any further questions for me, please let me know.